Everyone has a bright light inside of them that deserves to be seen by the world. That's why it's time to shine the light on the extraordinary who are accomplishing phenomenal things. This is the Shine Out Loud Show with Lillian Ogbogo.
Good evening, good afternoon, good morning, wherever in the world you are. Welcome to another episode of the Shine Out Loud Show with me, Lillian Ogbogo. Now, I seem to have spent this series finding incredible women to interview, and tonight is no different. I have the fantastically amazing body doubling Femprenuer who has gone from foster care to, as she put it, the $1 million ROLODEX in terms of her contacts and the businesses that she creates and works with. This is a woman that works with other business to show other fempreneurs to show up and step into the world in the most powerful way they can. I'm talking about Ungenita Prevost. Hi, Ungenita. How you doing?
I'm doing great. Thank you for having me.
Oh, you're welcome. Now, we were talking in the pre-chat saying I'd wanted to interview you for like a year and a half, and LinkedIn had its moments and it didn't happen. So I am so glad to have you on the show today.
I'm excited to be here. I love this. I'm ready.
Awesome. Now, for those who don't know you, you are a Hollywood stunt double. You are a fempreneur. You have gone from foster care, homelessness. You've gone through all sorts of adversity to the woman you are today. So there's so many things to unpack. When you think of yourself outside of your business titles, outside of everything you've experienced, who are you?
I'm a girl like everyone else with dreams, goals, desires, and a will to live. And I think that I've always had that, growing up in the projects, going through foster care. I always had a dream. I believed, I felt something inside. So I think the best way to sum it up is I'm a believer.
Okay. So I love the fact that you say that you're a believer, and anybody looking at your story will know that, yeah, you believed in, you had to survive. So how did you end up going through foster care? What happened? What was the story? And how did that shape you in the terms of the woman you are today?
Yeah, so there's two parts to that story. The first part is I was actually taken away from my biological mother when I was 2.
Okay.
And my biological father put me on the doorstep of his quote unquote side chick, and she became my foster parent.
Right.
And she essentially took care of me. When I was about 12, she had a stroke one night.
Oh, no.
And was taken to the hospital. And that's when everything changed in my life, because she didn't come back. And my biological father came back into my life, and there was a big fight amongst my foster parent and her family and my father's family.
Right.
And to make a long story short, in an odd way, I ended up meeting my biological mother.
Okay.
When I was 12. So I met her when I was 12. And at first it was a dream come true. I thought, wow, this is my real mother, because I had issues growing up. I didn't feel that I fit in. There was just something intrinsically that just, I knew that I didn't quite belong there, but that was my story. And I lived with my biological mother. It was very tumultuous. It was not good, for a 12-year-old. And by the time I was 14, I ended up in a children's shelter because she was reported for child abuse. And I ended up in a children's shelter. And that's essentially where I, when I entered the system.
Right.
And I stayed in the system until I was aged out at 18 and a half years old.
I cannot begin to imagine. So your father dropped you on the doorstep of his side chick. his side chick raises you.
Yes.
So he sounds like an incredible woman.
Yes. And thank you for highlighting that, because she gets lost in this story a lot, because people always ask about, my mother, and they ask about, my father, but they forget that, she is the real hero in the story, because she took on someone else's child. She took on a man that was not faithful to her, a man that was not committed to her. And she took on all of his baggage, all of his stuff. And she loved me unconditionally. She did not make me feel like I wasn't her child. The reason I felt that I wasn't her child was because of the other children. And
Right.
They made me feel like I wasn't part of the family. I didn't quite belong at times. And I started to pick up on that. But she never, ever, ever made me feel that I wasn't her child. I wasn't important. I wasn't, I couldn't be successful. I mean, she really believed in me. And if she didn't believe in me, I don't know what would have happened to me if that woman, and her name is Emma, if she didn't believe in me. And unfortunately, she died when I was 12. So that night, she died about 2 months later. So
it's a shame. It's a shame that she's not here physically.
I know.
The woman that you've become. And I'm glad that we get to talk about her, because when you talk about people getting lost in stories, I think someone like that should not be forgotten. So to your foster mother, your mother, the woman who raised you, let's celebrate her in this moment. So you went from care, as well, in the UK we'll say care, but in the States it's foster care.
Yes.
You went from foster care, and somehow you went from that to body doubles. I want to know what happened in between and how you ended up as a body double, and would have seen something that you were a body double in, and I have questions.
Yes. So going back to belief. So I was about 10 years old, and I was in the Iberville projects in New Orleans. And I remember I'd look outside, and I was a dreamer. Like I just would, I would sit and I would dream, fantasize. And I always wanted to go to Hollywood. And
Right.
I thought Hollywood would solve all of my problems. If I was in Hollywood, I would make it and I'd have a perfect life. And so when I was 12, after the incident with Emma, I ended up in the San Francisco Bay Area with my biological mother. Mm-hmm. And so I ended up in California. So I ended up in the system in California. So I was a ward of the state for about 4 years, maybe 3 to 4 years. I was a ward of the state. And immediately when they aged me out of the foster care system, and I just want to set this up for everyone, because foster children get such a bad rap, because when you are in the system, you are tagged an unwanted child. You are a problem child. You are a parentless child. Yeah. So people tend to put you in a box. They don't really want you around. You go to school, you have that stigma. It's a very difficult, thing to carry for a child. Yeah. And then they give you your walking papers at 18, and you have to go. And you literally are put on the street. And I'm not exaggerating.
How?
They put you on the street. They, look, you have to go. You're 18. We cannot support you. You have to go. So luckily, I had been working since I was 15. So I had been working. So I already had a work ethic. I already had a sense of making money and, the responsibility. But I didn't have the sort of, skill set yet in terms of, now you have to take care of yourself and you have to get an apartment and you have to pay bills. I didn't have that. So I was immediately, pushed into that role because I was aged out. So with being aged out, again, I just started working and and that's all I knew how to do. And I wanted to work in the beauty and fashion industry. So I was already taking jobs as a fashion merchandiser. I was really good actually at building teams. I worked at a store called Wet Seal.
Okay.
Then I worked at the body shop doing, sort of makeovers and skincare. And the state of California gave me a grant to go to beauty college. So I went to beauty college and I loved it. I loved every minute of beauty college. It was amazing. So I received a grant from the state of California to go to beauty college. And I have to say, I enjoyed every second of beauty college because I was able to play with makeup, skincare products, do makeovers, you name it. I loved it. Cool. And after beauty college, my third foster mother, her granddaughter was actually a makeup artist in Hollywood. And she said, oh, if you want to go to Hollywood, you can come here and sleep on my couch and figure things out. So I loaded up a U-Haul. I had less than $1,000 to my name. And I just, drove to Hollywood and slept on her sofa. And I started getting some very small parts at the time, like extra roles, bit parts, higher base roles where you see a pretty girl next to an actor or dancing scenes. So I started getting these parts like immediately upon arrival. So I thought, okay, there's something going on here. This is good, And then I got an agent. Okay. And then I started to go out for, big parts. And along the way, I started dancing in music videos and developing my talent, but also building my resume. And one day I got a call from a casting director, and he said, do you want to audition for a Janet Jackson music video? It's freestyle. And, we just want you to, you'll go in and you'll dance in a group, and that'll be that. That's it, no big deal. And I loved it because I was more of a freestyle artist. I was a dancer. Jazz was actually my specialty. But every time I went to auditions, I was always like one count of 8 behind. Mm-hmm. And I remember when I auditioned for the Laker girls, and I was so excited. I was like, yes, I'm going to be a Laker girl. Yes. And then, of course, I was one count of 8 behind. And, auditions, you have to pick up the choreography like in 5 minutes. And if you don't, it doesn't look good, So it was freestyle. So I do my thing. I leave. I go back to my apartment in North Hollywood. And all of a sudden, I get a call. And it was Scott Lazarus, who was a very famous casting director. And he was responsible for all of the major music videos, like the rap videos and the pop videos. And so he said, I think I want to make you the double. And I was like, what? And he's like, yeah, I want to make you the double. And I was like, okay. And the next thing you know, I was on set with Janet Jackson, and Sam Fine was the makeup artist. And was on set for Nutty Professor. And that was the first stand-in photo double gig that I received. And after that, it just sort of opened up the world's, the doubling world, because there's so many aspects of it. So a lot of people don't understand. They think that it means that someone doesn't want to show their body, or sometimes it's for insurance purposes. Sometimes, like I'm sure you heard of Maya Campbell. She was in the show with LL Cool J and Alfonso Ribeira. She was an actress, and she was pregnant, and I body doubled for her. I stood in for Tamala Jones. I stood in for Christina Milian. Like there was, all these different types of parts, because once I was in that world, people would say, oh, well, we were talking about height. So a lot of the actresses are in the 5'2" to 5'4" range.
Ungenita, I love the fact that you just dropped, oh yeah, so I body doubled for Janet Jackson and went into, and didn't skip a beat and talking about, I'm like, did she just say she body doubled for Janet Jackson? And I'm supposed to keep my cool. I go, oh, okay, yeah, that's absolutely fine. How did you deal with that's Janet Jackson, you having to do this and have that, did you have that moment where you're like, this is surreal?
Well, I have to say, when I moved to Hollywood, I I didn't want to be a groupie. I told myself, you're not going to be a groupie. And don't ever, look like you're stalking a famous person, because I would go on sets and I would see people stalking celebrities. And I never wanted to be that person. So I sort of, approached the celebrities like regular people. So when I met Janet Jackson on the set, she walked up to me and she said, "Hi, my name is Jen." I was just like, I thought, okay, I kind of knew that already. You know what I mean? And so for that video, I was standing in for her. And then we were doing some pickup shots. So in the video, you see hands and feet morphing. So she's lying down and then she morphs into like another scene, and her nails and hands, and then she puts on her clothes and then dances out the room. And so those were the shots that I did for that particular shoot. But again, it was a job. It was sort of a dream come true. But I wanted to be professional. I didn't want to act like I was like a fan, you know what I mean? Because I didn't want people to think, oh my God, she's going to stalk her. And it opened up a lot of doors for me, because all of a sudden, it was in the casting world. If I was good enough for Janet to stand in and do all this work, then they would say, oh, well, why don't you go work with Christina Milian or Tamala Jones or Regina King or, all these other actresses. So I was working all the time. And the stand-in work was quite lucrative. I mean, it derailed my acting career, but it was quite lucrative to stand in,
Oh. So you went through the acting route. You started in makeup artistry. You then became a body double. Where did the Taekwondo come in?
You're bringing up all those juicy moments in my life that other people forget about. Well, actually, Taekwondo came about because I was a dancer, obviously, and I sort of retired. I remember when I retired from body double work, I kind of, said, okay, I'm not going to do this anymore. I want to go into business, and I wasn't dancing anymore. And then I just naturally, gravitated to Taekwondo because it was sort of like dance. It was really vigorous training, hardcore, which I love. And I started doing that, and I started, advancing in ranks. And I think I ended up with a green or a blue belt. I can't even remember.
I think from what I read, you have a green belt. So for me, I was like, oh, wow. I was like, this is a woman I need to talk to.
I know, people, it's so funny because when I think about it, I mean, it was a big deal back then. It was a big deal, but now I'm like, oh, whatever. It's like, oh, been there, done that. I can do a sidekick, if I have to.
Good to know. So Dark Alley, you're the one that I'm coming to.
I know karate, but I also know crazy.
So you retired from dancing, and when we say retired from dancing, can I ask you how old you were when you retired from dancing? When you
Oh gosh, I was about 28 because here's the deal. Okay, this is what people don't understand about Hollywood. Hollywood, the goal is to make it by the time you're 27 because there's a lot of age discrimination. It's the reality of it, right? So the last thing you want to do is, be 30 years old trying to figure out or trying to get a role, because they do label you in Hollywood. Maybe things have changed, but essentially they label you. So for me, I felt like it wasn't working out the way that I thought it, should. And I felt like it was time for me to make some changes. At the time, I met my then husband, and he motivated me and inspired me to get into business because he said, I think you're smart, and, what about doing something else? And that's when I entered the business world. And I loved it because I had been making a living, quote unquote, I don't want to say that word because it won't sound right, but you know what I'm saying, right? I made a living as a, quote unquote actress, dancer, body double, spokesmodel, whatever. I had made a living that way. And then all of a sudden I was able to make a living without, that. And it was empowering actually for me.
Okay. So we know what took you from the camera to business, and you've gone on and you've become a life coach. You've actually gone into so many different areas. But what I find fascinating is that even though you removed yourself from Hollywood, you actually have a production company. Is it Little Girl Productions?
Oh my gosh. Well, I don't have it anymore, but I did do that. And that was, gosh, you're good. You're really good. I have to say, you're good.
Thank you.
Well, the thing about the production company, and it's so funny, I again, something most people don't talk about, but that was a big moment in my life, because when I started that production company, ironically, I started it and then I ended it and I started the business that I have today. But that was the pivot into the business world, and it showcased these other talents. So yes, I could dance. Yes, I was, an actress, an artist, a performer, but all of a sudden I was doing sales and marketing for film companies. And I was on the phone talking to investors about investing in movies. And I was dealing with scripts and coordinating meetings. And I really loved that. And I felt like a businesswoman. I was like, oh, people are going to take me seriously now. All righty, let's go. So that was sort of the transition period into my current, company. So yeah, so.
Okay.
Good that you remember that. It's good. I love it. You're good.
Well, thank you. We do try. So let's talk about the company you have today. And you talked about the skills that you've picked up from the production company, from even your time as a dancer. You were able to negotiate and start. But you just said something that is actually fascinating. You go, people will start to take me seriously. What was that moment that you said that clicked for you, that said, I am a businesswoman, I am successful? What was that pivotal moment for you?
I was in production, and I was at production meetings with men and very talented women, very educated women. And I brought something to the table, and that was like an aha moment, because I was no longer this little girl in a bikini, because every day that I went on a movie set, I was pretty much in a bikini,
right?
Some type of scantily clad outfit, dancing, whatever. That was just my life. Right. So all of a sudden, I'd walk into a meeting and people knew who I was. They knew my background. So they were always very skeptical. Right. And there were times where I had the stigma of, oh, she's just a gold digger, because, in Hollywood, pretty girls marry rich men and, they, carry you off into the sunset. So there was a little bit of that stigma, but I worked really hard because I wanted to have my own identity, and I felt that I had something to offer. And that's one of the messages that I instill in women today, because there's such a big conflict between being feminine and being a businesswoman. So I still have a little bit of that, glamour and, yes, like today I'm got my shoulders out, woo, I still have a little bit of that in
me,
but I'm a businesswoman. I have a business, I run a business, and that's important to me. But I also feel that I'm comfortable being who I am. And one does not negate the other one. And I want women to really understand that message. So if you see a woman walk into the room and she's really feminine, don't judge her. Don't assume that she doesn't have anything to offer because she's wearing a dress, or her hair is big, or she has false eyelashes on. Like, don't make that mistake.
Yeah, you said a mouthful, and we haven't even jumped into those questions that are going to deal with that, because I think there's something about, you've touched on a couple of things. First of all, you touched on the fact that you had to recognize your own worth.
Yes.
Outside of the identity of being the video girl, the video chick, you no, that's not my identity. That's my day job. This is who I am.
Yes.
And so that takes a level of self-work to get to that point of going, there's something else here.
Yep.
So let's talk about the business you have today, and what I want you to give our audience your full brand name, and then you tell me why you decided this was the brand name for your business.
Absolutely. So I wanted to add this because I forgot to make this point, but I think body doubling, even though I don't talk about it a lot, this is the point that I want women to get, because in show business, you go into show business, it's all vanity.
Yeah.
And it touches, it pulls on your self-esteem, because even though you're a pretty girl, you're attractive, every day you walk into a room and you see, 100 girls and they all look like you. And then you start thinking, oh, well, I love her hair, or, oh, well, maybe her legs are better than mine. And, oh, she's skinnier. Oh, I kid you not, and I remember early 20s, there were some moments, where I felt uncomfortable because you're constantly being judged, right?
Yeah.
So then when I became a body double, and I would, go and stand in, and I want to say this because people often ask, working with Janet Jackson, she was by far the nicest, most respectful person that I work with. However, I stood in for some actresses that weren't very nice. They were intimidated. They were very catty. And that taught me that they have their own self-worth issues.
Yeah.
Because I remember, I won't name her, I was on a TV show and I was standing in, and I'll never forget, she was making, I don't know, like 10,000 a week. I think that's what the producer said. She was like 10,000 a week.
Okay.
And I was making like 500 a day. Okay.
Right.
And she wasn't nice. And I obviously triggered her, without realizing,
Right.
And they said, oh, well, it's probably because she's prettier. She thinks you're prettier or whatever. That's subjective, because some people would probably say that she's prettier than me. That's fine. But the point is, she was not nice. And I started to meet women that were not nice to me. And there was this cattiness on set. And I thought, oh my gosh.
Wow. So how did you handle that?
I think that's when I started to gain more confidence, because I thought, well, if they're intimidated by me, then I must have something good to offer. Like, oh, okay, well, wow. Because again, like, think about this. She's the star. I'm just the stand-in, and I'm making, 500 and she's making 50,000. Like, why are you mean to me? Like, I'm going back to my apartment in North Hollywood. I'm hoping that I get a gig, next week. And you have a career. Why be mean to me?
Well, again, I think if you, from the woman you are today, looking back at it, it could be a couple of things. I mean, the fact is, we've been taught that we have to compete for everything.
Yeah.
And the resources that are available to us, especially women of color, are especially limited. So if you got what you got to fight for what you have. So I don't need anybody prettier than me, slightly better than me, to be in my space and shadow me. And then all of a sudden my stuff is gone and you're the one making the 10,000 a week.
Yeah, exactly. Sad, but true.
So let's go to the business today. The business you have today. What is the business? And tell us the name of the business, please.
So the name of the business, I like to identify the business via the brands, because I've evolved over the years. So I have SellingINStilettos, which is my main brand. And then I recently launched FEMME 500, which is the new brand that you'll probably see everywhere, because it's my global international network and feminine leadership club. And then I have $1 Billion ROLODEX, which is my soon to be released podcast. So those are the brands, and everything that I do is essentially centered around feminine leadership. And I teach women the tools, the systems, the strategies in 3 core areas: sales, communication, and networking, because those were the three skills that I essentially are responsible for me surviving and thriving. And, when I was aged out of the system, I had to learn how to sell myself. I had to learn how to communicate to get a job. I've never gone to college. I had to learn how to network to, meet people. And again, even the Janet Jackson gig, that was via networking, because my agent at the time did not want me to go out for music videos. So I was networking. I met the casting director. I said, I'd love to, submit for music videos. And then that's how I ended up with that opportunity.
And that's incredible, because that's an area where we as women seem to be a little hesitant on. I'll use the word hesitant very loosely. Some of us just feel like we suck at it. So from your experience, why is it that we as women, and I'm jumping around my questions here, but why is it that we as women are afraid of actually getting ourselves in front of other people and doing that networking thing? What is it about networking that we find so scary?
I think networking brings out all the flaws. I mean, I'm actually discussing this with corporates, and the number one reason is self-worth, self-belief. Women don't have that, gravitas. So they go into those situations feeling limited, and it causes them to pull back, and they don't present themselves. And there's a study on job interviews, and basically women have to be at 65 to 70%. Men have to be 30 to 35% before they will actually apply. So women have those deep-seated issues, the self-worth, the self-confidence, the self-esteem. And when you're networking, it just brings everything to light. And that's why 96% of women do not know how to monetize their networks, because they go into those situations, they socialize, they're having fun, but they're not conducting business. They're not strategic about it. They're not asking the right questions. They're not thinking about opportunities. They're not looking at people beyond the initial meeting and thinking, what if I get to know this person, and building that $1 billion Rolodex? That's sort of how it happened, because I've always cultivated those relationships so that, if I'm ever in a jam, I have that Rolodex, because every single time I was left with zero money in my bank account, guess what happened? I picked up the phone. I called people. People would, give me referrals. Oh, this person's hiring. Oh, go to this agency. It was always networking.
You know what? I love this. I love this. I love this, because I keep saying it over here in the UK that instead of fighting the old boy network, we need to understand what it is they do and do it ourselves.
Exactly.
Because over here, you have situations where there are jobs that have never, ever been advertised. And these jobs are worth hundreds of thousands a year in salary. And we're talking about really major positions, but people get these jobs because, John in my club, let me introduce you to Dick. And you're like, how is this person who basically may not be competent is in here?
35%.
So that is really, I think that is going to be a powerful thing to help undo. And so I'm glad that we're going to be talking about that. Now, as somebody who's gone from different brands in terms of reinventing yourself, how can someone in this age right now reinvent their brand, reinvent themselves to become something else, become someone else?
Great question. And one of my favorites, because I've obviously reinvented myself. So, being in the projects, right? The little black girl in the projects. And then all of a sudden, I'm in the system, and then I'm, going to beauty college, and then I'm in Hollywood, and, so I've reinvented myself, a few times in my life. And I think the thing about reinvention is you have to own your evolution and be confident about moving on and letting go of the past. Because sometimes what happens is when you move on, you have to detach yourself from your previous, let's say, habits,
right?
Maybe environment or network, people that aren't serving you. And so you have to commit to your evolution and step into that. And what I find is as you evolve, right, sometimes, you have to let go. And if you constantly are letting go, you're going to naturally reinvent yourself. You're going to naturally allow your talents and working on yourself, right, to grow simultaneously. Will elicit the transformation. But every single time I reinvented myself, it's just me owning, more of who I am, stepping into my power and letting go of things that, no longer serve me. I was talking about this on my FEMME 500 call tonight. And I said, I'm going to take a stance for women to network better. So when women come to me with, with selfish behavior, because I don't network like that, I'm all about two-way support, right. Give and take. I network with the mindset of reciprocity, and if women don't come into my circles, I will release them. And I'm okay with that because we have to get better at the way we network. And when we look at gender, equality, we are our own worst enemies because we are not working together collectively in a manner to push us forward, independent of men. And that's why I'm taking a stance, because we have to get better. We have to do better in order for us to grow together.
I like it. And I endorse that message. I do. That's a very powerful message. And so everything that I'm looking at you in terms of the reinvention, in terms of growing your brands, in terms of actually building the various brands, what are the top two things that you will say that any female entrepreneur, whether she's starting out or she's had a business for years, need to do to actually lock in the mindset that she needs to succeed?
I would say first thing you do is if you have an idea, give that idea life.
Okay.
So don't negate it. Don't, allow the negative self-talk to prevent you from taking action. Give that idea life. Write it down. Right. Put it on a sticky note, whiteboard, vision board. Give it life. Mm-hmm. The next thing I recommend is doing research. I'm a huge component of research. That's why, I use statistics all the time. So I'm always, quoting stats. It's important that you do your research. You understand where the market's at, where the market's going. You want to position yourself so that you're ahead. You're not falling behind.
Right.
And I think sometimes people jump on trends too late. So you want to get in the habit of looking at what's going on and looking at those stats. And critical thinking is so important, removing the emotion from it. Yes, it's a great idea, but is it a viable idea? Is it solving a real world problem? And then tying a communication plan to that, a strong message. Right. Communication is so important. And it's one of the reasons when women network, I often say this to women when they come to my events. They say, well, what should I bring? How should I dress? Bring your $1 million one-liner. How are you going to introduce yourself so that you're unforgettable and people remember you and people refer people to you? So communication is so important.
Okay, so communication, do your homework, give your business life, write it down, give it birth. Do not allow it to be squelched by the self-talk.
And make sure you're solving a real world problem.
Okay, all right. So I love this. So we've talked about the brands that you have, but then I'm curious, there's something that I read about and I'm like, what is push on pennies? Push on pennies, not push.
Oh my gosh. That was actually a publishing gig that I had many years ago to help launch this publishing company And I loved it. I really loved it. And I was handling the content strategy, driving, the brand. And I'm no longer attached to the brand. I think the brand is now managed by another company. But that was one of I guess you'd call one of my content marketing projects. But it was very much, I love that project because the content, I mean, I haven't looked at the site in a while because they rebranded, but the content was centered around probably timely right now for women to, learn how to deal with money and also, indulge wisely. So posh on pennies.
Okay. All right. So I was curious, and it's like, okay, I had to remember to ask because I wanted to know.
No problem. No problem. You're so good at the research.
I have great help with this.
I love it. She's so good. Awesome.
Thank you. So you do quite a lot, and you're bi-coastal, not even bi-coastal, you're between countries, between the States and the UK. How, with everything that you're doing, how do you balance your time?
Well, right now I don't have a choice because we're in lockdown. So we're in lockdown. So it's actually been quite peaceful and productive because I'm in one place. I'm not, moving around. Even though I loved my life and travel and going to different events, this has allowed me to center and focus.
Okay.
And I find that I'm actually producing projects that I sort of tucked away because now I have the time to produce them. So it's actually a good thing. But I think balance comes from you making the decision that you want balance in your life, because there are days where I just love to work on my business. I love, what I do. So I will work late because it's my choice. But then there are days where I sleep in and I have my pajamas on until 2, and I'm just hanging out and I'm not doing anything, So I think you create your own balance, and balance looks, different for everyone else. But I definitely don't have a 9 to 5 schedule. I will tell you that. Very difficult for me to do that.
All right. So I like this. And I like the fact that you're honest. You're like, some days, me, the pajamas, we're working together. And yeah. I think London everyone went through that whole, we're just going to live in pajamas during the lockdown. So
I have those days. And you know what? And also because London, this, right? Because of the climate. And so it just makes you feel cozy and you want to stay in versus when I'm in Los Angeles, I wake up at 6, I'm out the door at 6:30. It's 75 degrees. I'm like hopping in my car. I'm like, yes, where's the gym?
And London is like, it's foggy and cold. I want my bed.
Exactly. Yes.
Yeah, London is, the only time I'm in love with London during summer, and then we have a heat wave, and then I'm begging. I'm like, somebody give me an air conditioning, please, air conditioning.
I love the heat wave this year. Let me tell you, I loved it. It was only like, what, 12 days?
Okay, now I know you're not a Londoner. So you see, it's 12 days to you. For us, it felt like the center of hell had opened up and taken up residence.
No.
We are not used to these levels. We're like,
I loved it.
I was like, I love the sunshine. I love the heat. But after a while, when you're like, I can't sleep. I can't eat. I wake up, I'm angry and hot. It's like, it just stopped working.
12 days. 12 days.
Like it's only 12 days. I'm like, no, center of hell. It was too hot. So we've come to that point of the show where we talk about our so loud moment for the week. And this is where we get to celebrate a person, a thing, whatever it is that you want to celebrate. So who would you like to celebrate, or what would you like to celebrate, Ungenita?
You know who I would like to celebrate?
Tell me.
I'd like to celebrate, gosh, there are a few people. Oh gosh, this is tough.
You can celebrate more than one.
Okay. So, because you mentioned this, I'm going to do this. I've never done this. I'm going to celebrate Emma Glass. And Emma Glass was the woman that raised me unconditionally and is really responsible for me being here today. And yeah, I'm going to celebrate her. I was going to actually, name someone else, but I thought, you know what? Because you mentioned her, and that really touched me that you mentioned her, because she's the hero in the story. And she's no longer here, but I do feel that she watches over me, and she's that angel. So that's who I celebrate.
That is very powerful, and that's very awesome. So to Emma Glass, the woman who was instrumental to making sure that you believed in yourself, who helped raise you, who loved you unconditionally. We celebrate her today.
Yes. Amen. Thank you.
You're welcome. You're welcome. So before we end, and I try not to do the Columbo thing with one more question, and I always fail. What is new for you? What is coming up? What do we have to keep our eyes out for? And yeah, we'll start with that. And now I have one more question.
Sure. So FemGlobal500.com. That's the Feminine Leadership Network. And that will be launching in any minute now. So by the time you listen to this, it will be live. So that's pretty much where everything's going to be at. That's the main brand. All of my networking events. If you want to join the network, everything's going to be there. And corporate training will be there as well. Right. Also, my podcast, $1 Billion Rolodex, that will be out. And every 2 months, I host $1 Billion Rolodex, the online extravaganza. So for women who want to learn how to raise their social capital, I take you through 5 days and I share with you all of my techniques and strategies that I learned along the way to build a $1 Billion Rolodex. So those are the 3 things that I will share now, but there are some more, but I can't announce those until 2021.
All right. That's fine. You can come back on the show and spill the tea in 2021.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, so how can women connect with the FEMME 5000 network?
So FemGlobal500.com. That's the website. But if you want to connect with me directly, go over to the #1 social network in the world for business women, LinkedIn. It's how we met. So connect with me on LinkedIn and, send me a DM. Let me know that you heard, the show and what you think, and ask me any other question, more questions, I'm happy to answer.
Okay. So what we'll do is we'll put the link to your LinkedIn profile in the show, pages. And any other links that you would want us to add as well, we'll add them as well. We'll add the Femme Global as well. And will the link for the podcast be ready as well so that we can add that as well?
Yes. Awesome. Thank you.
You are so welcome. So I guess my last question is, you have a lot on your plate coming for 2021. Can we get you back for the show?
I would love to come back on the show. Absolutely. Can we do something like really edgy? Can we talk about a really edgy topic?
Oh, you can pick any topic. I'm happy to do the edgy topics.
I like, talking about edgy topics. So something in the women's leadership realm,
We will dedicate a whole episode, maybe more, on feminine leadership, and we will have you as our special guest. In fact, we might do something a bit different and also get you on our LinkedIn Live. So we'll start talking about feminine leadership, because that's something that is absolutely one of the things to say I'm passionate about feminine leadership is an understatement.
I love that. And you know what? I love the Femprenuer term. Love it.
Thank you. So Folks, it's a wrap. You have heard Ungenita Prevost, her story and her evolution, and where she talks about you need to own your evolution in terms of your brand so you start stepping forward. But not only that, is actually walking into a room to actually realizing your worth. And do not wait for other people to define your worth, because they will define it based on their own perspective. So you know what to do. Give us a like, share the show, send us to your grandma. She can listen. Just show us some love. But most importantly, go and find Ungenita and find out more about what she's doing. And let's make 2021 a very successful year for us as women. Let's do it. It's a wrap. Bye.
You've been listening to the Shine Out Loud Show. If you want to connect with us or let us know what you thought of today's show, be sure to follow us on Twitter at Shine Out Show.